Welcome to So True, and our devotional today is entitled Thinking Ahead, and it's based on Colossians 3 verses 1 to 4. Let's take some time to read the text. Paul writes and he says this, "If then you were raised with Christ, seek those things which are above, where Christ is sitting at the right hand of God. Set your mind on things above, not on things on the earth. For you died, and your life is hidden with Christ in God. When Christ, who is our life, appears, then you also will appear with him in glory." In his book, 100 Bible Verses, Robert Morgan chronicles how Dr. Martin Luther King once told of riding the bus across town every weekday to attend high school. This was the era of segregation, and so blacks were required to sit at the back of the bus, while white people sat in the front. Even if there was an absence of whites riding the bus, the blacks were still relegated to the back and forbidden to sit up front. Adding insult to injury, even if all the black seats were occupied, riders had to stand over the empty seats reserved for whites. King said of that time, "I would end up having to go to the back of that bus with my body. But every time I got on that bus, I left my mind up on the front seat. And I said to myself, one of these days, I'm going to put my body up there where my mind is." I love that story. And I love the truth it teaches and preaches. It's an absolute rule in life that our bodies end up where our minds are. Our thinking shapes our living. Our attitudes determine our actions. The Bible is clear about mankind. Proverbs 23:7, "For as he thinks in his heart, so is he." In large measure, a man is the accumulation of his thinking. The quality of our lives depends on the quality of our thoughts. In Colossians 3, 1 to 4, which we just read, Paul understands this principle as he urges the saints in Colossae to set their mind on things above, not on things on the earth. The Christ they love and follow has ascended to the right hand of God, which calls for elevated thinking on the part of his disciples. They were to aim at, keep seeking, be intent on, fasten their thoughts to things above. They were to fix their attention on the ascended and glorified Savior. He has all authority, and they should live out his lordship over them in all aspects of their lives. Their lives were now hidden with Christ in God, and so although they were not yet glorified, they were secure, they were safe in the glorified Christ, who was returning to glorify them in a future day. Setting their minds above included looking upward to Christ's present reign over them in heaven and forward to his return to take them to the Father's house that they might be where he is. That's John 14, 1, 2, 3, alongside Colossians 3, 1 to 4. This elevated thinking was intended to raise their game in the arena of daily discipleship. When we set our minds on something, it focuses our energy and energizes our focus. Thoughts of Christ, heaven, and the life to come, when properly channeled, make us more effective. There's several ways we will see that worked out in our lives. Number one, focusing on heaven restores our hope in seasons of sorrow. Remember how Paul talks in Romans 8:18 about that our present suffering is not to be compared with our future glory? Number two, focusing on heaven reminds us of God's unassailable sovereignty. I love Revelation 4, 1 to 3, where John is called up into heaven. He goes through a door and he sees a throne, and there's one who sits on that throne. And then John is given a panorama view of future things, horrible things, the outpouring of God's judgment on a wicked and unrepentant world, the restoration of Israel, the preservation of the saints, the return of Christ with the church. the establishment of the millennial kingdom, and it all falls under this rubric of a throne and one who sits under it. Focusing on things above reminds us of the God who reigns above. Number 3, focusing on heaven reminds us that this world is not our home. Philippians 3:20-23 or 20-21 reminds us that our citizenship is in heaven. And therefore, our link to Christ, who is in heaven, should shape the way we live on earth. Just as Philippi was a colony of Rome, and although many, many miles away from Rome, Rome dominated the law and literature of the city of Philippi, and heaven ought to dominate our behavior on earth. 4, we're carrying on this idea of setting our affection on things above. 4, focusing on heaven refocuses our attention on what is of true value. Matthew 6:19-21 reminds us to lay up treasure in heaven. Things of truest value are not purchased with money. And so you and I need to make sure that our value system is determined and defined by what is of everlasting value. And then finally, 5, focusing on heaven reignites our fervor to serve the Lord. 1 Corinthians 15:58 comes at the end of a great chapter on the resurrection, the rapture of the church, the moment in which we will all be transformed. And as Paul kind of wraps that section up, he says, therefore, in the light of that, you know what? We always abound in the work of the Lord, knowing in the light of Jesus' resurrection and his return that whatever we do for him is not in vain. It's not forgotten. It doesn't get lost at death. And therefore, as you and I meditate on heaven and the return of Jesus, it just fires us up to serve him with greater fervor, knowing that our works will follow us. Let's put heaven to the front of our thinking. Let's remind ourselves of what C.S. Lewis said. It is since Christians have largely ceased to think of the other world. And by the way, that's what Colossians 3:1-4 encourages us to do. But as Christians have failed to think of the other world, they have become so ineffective in this one. Aiming at heaven, thinking about things above brings life into focus. And so I encourage you to do that. As someone has said rightly, aim at heaven and you get earth thrown in. Aim at earth and you get neither.